true event. When a man falls, who stops to help? Yesterday, before going to the cigar lounge, my buddy and I stopped at a barbecue establishment to get something to eat. It was supposed to be an ordinary stop. Nothing unusual. Two friends getting some food before heading somewhere else to sit back, smoke a cigar, talk, and enjoy the rest of the day. But what happened inside that restaurant has stayed with me. Not simply because my friend nearly passed out. What bothered me almost as much was what happened, or, more accurately, what didn't happen after he fell. My buddy ordered his food first and went to sit down. I placed my order a few moments later and walked over to the table where he was sitting. When I approached him, his head was down and his eyes were closed. Because I know him, and because I know he isn't particularly religious, I jokingly said, laughing, "What you doing, praying?" I thought I was making a harmless joke. Then I noticed something was wrong. His body started shaking. In that instant, the joke disappeared. I knew something was happening. He wasn't praying. He was losing consciousness. I immediately moved behind him because I knew he was about to fall. I tried to position myself to catch him, but before I could completely stop it, he fell backward and struck his head against the bench at the table behind him. Everything changed in a matter of seconds. I lifted his head slightly and put my hand over his heart. I told him calmly, "Breathe. Breathe. Breathe." Those words were as much for me as they were for him. There is something about watching another human being lose consciousness that makes everything else disappear. The food doesn't matter. The conversation doesn't matter. Whatever you were thinking about 5 seconds earlier doesn't matter. There's only the person in front of you. Is he breathing? Is he conscious? Is he okay? My buddy eventually caught his breath and regained consciousness. Later, he explained that he had taken a sip of the beer he had opened, and it had apparently gone down the wrong way, obstructing his breathing and causing him to lose consciousness. Thankfully, he came around. We eventually got our food and continued on to the cigar lounge. But mentally, I didn't simply leave that restaurant. A part of me was still sitting there. Because while all of this was happening, something else caught my attention. People were watching. Not everyone, of course. Some of the employees responded. A few people were involved. But what struck me was how many people simply remained where they were, eating their food as if they were watching something happening on a television screen. Nobody seemed to move. Nobody rushed over. Nobody appeared to ask what was happening. And after it was over, when my friend had regained consciousness, when the immediate danger had passed, I didn't see people coming over saying, "Are you okay? Do you need anything? Is he all right?" Nothing. People simply continued eating. That bothered me. Maybe it shouldn't have. Maybe I'm old-fashioned. Maybe I expect too much from people. But I couldn't help thinking, what happened to compassion? When did another human being falling to the ground become something we could simply observe without becoming involved? When did somebody else's emergency become somebody else's entertainment? And perhaps more importantly, when did we become so absorbed in our own little worlds that another person's suffering became an inconvenience rather than a human concern? I'm not suggesting that everybody in that restaurant was a bad person. I'm not saying every person sitting there was heartless. There could have been people who didn't understand what was happening. Some may have been frightened. Some may have assumed the employees had the situation under control. Some may have been frozen because they didn't know what to do. Those are legitimate possibilities. But there was something about the overall atmosphere that bothered me. It was the absence of human curiosity and concern. You don't have to be a doctor to walk over and ask, "Are you okay?" You don't have to be religious to care about another human being. You don't have to know somebody to recognize that they're in trouble. You don't have to belong to someone's family, neighborhood, political party, race, religion, social class, or tribe to understand that a human being is lying on the floor. That's what disturbed me. Because I believe we've become increasingly tribal as a society. We divide ourselves into groups. My people. Your people. My neighborhood. Your neighborhood. My political party. Your political party. My religion. Your religion. My culture. Your culture. And somewhere in the middle of all these divisions, we can forget something extremely basic. Before we are members of any group, we are human beings. I don't have to know you to care whether you're breathing. I don't have to agree with you to help you stand up. I don't have to like your politics to help you if you're choking. I don't have to share your religion to call for help. And I certainly don't need to know your last name before deciding that your life has value. That's what yesterday made me think about. Perhaps we've become too comfortable, too full, too entertained, too distracted, too absorbed in consumption. We're eating while somebody else is hurting. We're scrolling while somebody else is crying. We're recording while somebody else is experiencing a crisis. We're watching other people's lives through screens so much that sometimes real life begins to feel like another piece of content. Maybe that's part of what disturbed me in that restaurant. The scene almost felt like a movie. My friend falls. People look. And then they go back to eating. As if the event had nothing to do with them. As if the suffering of another person existed outside the boundaries of their own lives. And that brings me to something uncomfortable. Have we become too accustomed to being spectators? We live in an age where people record fights instead of breaking them up. They photograph accidents instead of immediately checking on the people involved. They pull out their phones when something shocking happens. Human suffering has become content. And when everything becomes content, compassion can become optional. That's dangerous. Because one day, you may be the person who falls. One day, you may be the person who chokes. One day, you may be the person who collapses in a restaurant. One day, you may be the person sitting alone when something goes wrong. And suddenly, the question changes. It isn't, why didn't anybody help that person? It becomes, why isn't anybody helping me? That's the uncomfortable mirror. We want compassion when we're the ones who need it. But compassion is supposed to work in both directions. You don't get to demand humanity from everybody else while refusing to practice it yourself. And maybe that's why this experience affected me so deeply. I wasn't expecting strangers to become heroes. I wasn't expecting somebody to perform CPR. I wasn't expecting people to risk their own lives. I wasn't expecting strangers to know exactly what to do. But I was expecting somebody to care. There is a difference. Sometimes compassion is nothing more than walking over and saying, "Are you okay?" Sometimes it's getting an employee. Sometimes it's calling 911. Sometimes it's simply standing nearby so a person doesn't feel abandoned. We shouldn't underestimate the power of those little gestures. A human being who has just experienced something frightening can be reassured simply by hearing another human voice say, "I'm here. Are you okay?" That's not heroism. That's humanity. And perhaps that's what I felt was missing yesterday. Not heroism. Humanity. The experience also made me think about the word gluttony. I'm not using that word simply to criticize people for eating barbecue. I love food too. We all eat. We all enjoy ourselves. There's nothing wrong with sitting down to a good meal. But sometimes consumption becomes symbolic of something larger. We consume food. We consume entertainment. We consume information. We consume social media. We consume products. We consume other people's lives. And yet, strangely, we can become less willing to give. Give attention. Give time. Give concern. Give compassion. Give a damn. We can be surrounded by abundance and still become spiritually impoverished. A person can have a full stomach and an empty heart. A person can sit in a beautiful restaurant surrounded by food while becoming completely disconnected from the human being sitting around them. And that, to me, is a deeper problem than what happened in that restaurant. Because a society isn't ultimately measured by how much it can consume. It is measured by how it treats people when there is nothing to gain from helping them. That's the real test. Will you help somebody who can't help you? Will you show compassion to somebody who doesn't belong to your group? Will you stop eating long enough to make sure another person is breathing? Will you interrupt your comfortable afternoon because another human being has suddenly entered a moment of crisis? Those are small decisions. But small decisions reveal character. Yesterday reminded me that we should never become so comfortable in our own lives that another person's suffering becomes invisible. My friend was lucky. He regained consciousness. He was able to breathe. We were able to continue our day. Eventually, we made it to the cigar lounge. But I couldn't stop thinking about what happened. Because there was another lesson sitting beside the one about my friend's health. It was a lesson about us. About society. About how easily we can become spectators instead of participants in the lives of other human beings. And maybe the lesson isn't simply that other people should have helped. Maybe the lesson is that I should continue to be the person who helps. Even if nobody else moves. Even if nobody applauds. Even if nobody says thank you. Because compassion shouldn't depend on an audience. You shouldn't help somebody because you want to be called a good person. You should help because somebody needs help. That's it. No tribe required. No political agreement required. No friendship required. No transaction required. Just another human being in front of you. Yesterday, my buddy needed somebody to be there. I happened to be standing next to him. So I moved. And maybe that's what we have to remember. Life can change in seconds. The person sitting across from you today may be the person who needs you tomorrow. The stranger you ignore today could be the person who saves your life tomorrow. We don't know. That's why compassion matters. Not because everyone deserves our trust. Not because everyone will appreciate what we do. But because we don't want to become the kind of society where a person can fall right in front of us and we simply keep eating. Yesterday, I didn't just see my friend fall. I saw a reflection of something I think we should all be worried about. A society can become wealthy and still become poor in spirit. It can have more food than it needs and less compassion than it should. It can become connected through technology while becoming disconnected from the human beings sitting right beside us. And perhaps the question we should all ask ourselves is simple. If somebody fell beside you today, would you stop eating? Would you get up? Would you help? Would you care? Because sooner or later, every one of us will need somebody to stop what they're doing and care about us. And when that moment comes, I hope there is still somebody left in the world who will put down their fork, get out of their chair, walk over, and say, "Are you okay?"